Hello, hello. Welcome, everyone, to our podcast, Wines We Drink. I'm Charlotte Norsworthy, Varnum, and I'm joined, as always, by my co-host, Keith Herndon, a certified wine sommelier.
Hello, Charlotte, and hello and welcome to our listeners. We're so excited for our fourth season of Wines We Drink, and we're happy to have you with us for the second episode. We're recording today at our home base, My Wine Kitchen, but in a few moments, we'll be whisking our senses away to Spain's Casa Roja.
Wow, I can't believe it. Spanish wine? That's on my bucket list, personally. You know, I'm pretty familiar with French wine and Italian wine, even Greek wine at this point, all thanks to you. But when I hear Spanish wine, I never quite know what to expect. I mean, for me, Spanish wines are still very exotic and mysterious.
Well, Charlotte, you set me up nicely. We're going to be drinking a wonderful rosé that I mentioned is made by Spain's Casa Roja, but the label on the bottle reads Haru, which in Japanese translate to spring, and that's a great name for a rosé, right?
Right.
But here's where it gets mysterious. The art on the label at first glance is a large bouquet of fresh cut flowers. So, audience, you can go to our Instagram and our where we promote this episode, and you can see the bottle art, right? But when you look closely at those flowers, they're arranged in the shape of a skull, and there's no explanation for that I could find, so there's your mystery.
Wow, okay. That does sound intriguing. I'm looking forward to delving into that and this mysterious bottle of rosé with this dark skull underpinning. I don't know. I mean, so we'll get to that in just a few moments. But we launched our fourth season just this last week, and we had a great value Prosecco. It was perfect for your summer patio parties. So if you want to check out last week's selection or any of the other episodes from our previous seasons, please do check us out on all the major podcast platforms, including Spotify and Apple Podcasts. We also have a full episode guide at wineswedrink.com.
As many of you know, I'm a guest sommelier at the Tapped Athens Wine Tasting Market, and we'll be on there. We'll be on location there later in the season. But I'm mentioning it here because I discovered today's bottle at a tasting there. Todd and Angela Hurt, the Tapped's proprietors, they do such a great job of finding and presenting, wonderful niche wines. But this was part of a larger tasting of Spanish wines that we did there. But this one stood out to me. And I knew the first time I tasted it that it was one that I wanted to feature on the podcast so that I could share what I'm calling a gem with our listeners.
Wow, that's wonderful. I mean, I understand that you can drink rosé in all four seasons, but for me, rosé wine just means spring and summer. It's just that wine that's perfect for sipping by the pool or at the beach. It's a people pleaser with good reason, and it can be a serious wine, but you don't really have to take it all that seriously.
Yeah, that's right on point. What I love about this style of rosé is that it can be made from so many different grape varietals, and you get different presentation every time. If you want a strawberry sensation, you can go out and find a good rosé of Pinot Noir from Oregon's Willamette Valley. A rosé of Syrah may give you a little savoriness from that Syrah underpinning, right? So basically what I'm trying to tell our listeners is that simply calling a wine rosé does not tell you much about the wine. You really have to get in there and drink it because the variations are almost endless.
Wow. I mean, even when I think back to the previous seasons, all of our rosés have been so different, and I would even utilize them in different contexts or with different company. They're all super delicious, but you're right. They are all so different. And so, just because you are saying that there's a rosé in your glass doesn't necessarily mean that you have a first impression there. That Cape Mentelle rosé from Australia's Margaret River that we featured in season 1 was a potpourri of grapes, but the Rayburn rosé from Sonoma's Russian River Valley was that strawberry Pinot Noir that you mentioned, two very different flavors. And even last year's Summer in a Bottle, that one's a repeat purchase from me. From the south of France, it was a pale rosé with a hint of the florals you associate with the Côte de Provence. How will I remember this Haru, and what traits will stand out? By the way, I just want to toot my own horn for remembering all of those details of all the rosés. They're locked in, people, locked in. But what do you think is the takeaways for this Haru?
Well, the only way to know that is to open this bottle and drink it. So let's get started.
Much like the bottle, you two are mysterious. So let's pour some glasses.
You got it, Charlotte. We're opening the 2022 vintage, which was a year these vineyards received very minimal rain, which resulted in far lower yields than is typical for this vineyard. But the winemaker tells us that the warm summer months still provided some great vine development, and the lower yields actually translated into exceedingly high-quality grapes. So you're about to experience the results.
Ooh, well, this sounds very exclusive.
Right.
So I'm looking forward to it.
Well, I'm going to open this bottle, but I also, as we talked about the unusual art on the label, it's also an unusual bottle.
Right.
It actually, instead of a cork or a screw cap, it actually has a glass stopper. And it's held in place by some really industrial strength sealant, right? But it is a very interesting end bottle.
Yeah.
So I'm going to pour you a little of this wonderful rosé.
Listen to that. Yeah, it is such an interesting bottle. I mean, from the stopper down to the label, and unlike something I've ever seen before, and it's glass, but it also has a rubber seal in there for airtightness. But on the color, whenever you were pouring it, it is such an interesting kind of pale salmon, but I don't really know if that's the right way to describe it. Maybe more like a bright salmon. I'm going on the opposite end of the spectrum here, but like when you think about maybe the salmon colored crayon in a Crayola pack,
Okay.
that feels apt.
Well, you're right. This wine has a little more color than a similar rosé from, say, southern France, which would be really pale. This is almost a vibrant salmon, right. in a way, a shimmering salmon, right? Yeah. This wine was made from a blend of 87% Monastrell and 13% Garnacha. But the juice was only in contact with skins for about 2 hours.
Wow. I mean, that's amazing that you get that kind of vibrancy and such a beautiful pink color with only 2 hours of skin contact.
Yeah, it doesn't take long for the skin pigments to transfer to the juice, so making a rosé requires some skill to know just how much contact there should be. So now let's smell this wine and give our listeners your impressions of the aromas that are present.
I think my nose is almost predisposed to think strawberry when you're sniffing a rosé. But I'm missing that here with this wine. It's more citrusy is like the first thing that you get right out the gate. And so maybe the color is tricking me, but like a pink grapefruit sounds like it would fit here.
Well, bingo. That's exactly how the winemaker described it. Predominant aromas of grapefruit. And unless, and not like most rosé wines, this one has a subtle spicy and herbal fragrance. I mean,
Yeah.
I was when I first had this at Tapped, I couldn't come up with what that spicy note was.
Right.
The winemaker notes calls it fennel.
Oh my gosh. Wow, that's interesting. I mean, there is definitely something there that's warming whenever you're smelling it. And fennel would certainly do the trick. Right. But yeah, I don't know if I would have come up with that on my own either. But yeah, that herbal quality is definitely there, providing a little bit of warmth or heat that would come from herbal spices.
Right. Yeah. Okay, so now it's time for that first sip.
Okay, here we go.
Yeah. Let's have that sip.
Wow. I mean, immediately clear. Pucker on that one sip that those grapefruit aromas are carrying through to the tongue in a way that, is such a lovely sourness. It's a tartness that comes from the grapefruit citrus. It's right there and almost unmistakable. So I'm going to go in and take another sip. I can't get over that bite that the rosé has to it. That's so unique, at least from what I've tried, which, to be honest, as the listeners know, is not an extensive list of wines that I've had, but the citrus is super, super strong there, but there's still some layers of other sorts of, fruits, maybe more red fruits coming through. What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. There's some red fruits in here. I mean, there's definitely some raspberry notes, and I will say it's a rosé, so there's some faint strawberry there, but I keep coming back to the sharpness. And when I think of those flavors expressed as a red fruit, I'm thinking tart cherries
Oh, yeah.
and maybe even some tartness of a cranberry.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
So let's have another taste here, and this time I want you to concentrate on the wine's finish.
Okay. So, as I swallow this wine, considering the mouthfeel, the description that kind of keeps coming to my mind is luxurious. I don't know. The finish just seems to say like it's elegant. It's a wine that feels special.
Well, we talked earlier about the limited amount of time this juice was in contact with the skins to impart the color, but that doesn't fully explain how this wine was made, right? The bottle was made using the Saignée method, which means bleeding in French. In this method, the juice is squeezed from red-skinned grapes after they had a chance to rest on skins for a bit, bleeding more color and structure into the juice from the skins. So in this case, the Saignée method resulted in that slightly deeper color, and I think it certainly gave more structure to the wine along with these more robust flavors. And that's why I believe you're sensing this luxury, this elegance, right?
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, it definitely seems much more, deep than what meets the eye. But I will say all this mention of bleeding and skins and skull on the label. I'm like, what does it mean? But anyway, you've provided a selection of rosé here that really proves how sophisticated this wine style can be. And you mentioned last season how far rosé wines have come since the 1990s, blush wines and white Zinfandels. And so if we keep getting these deeply elegant rosé wines, I mean, there's no going back to the old days.
No, I absolutely agree. Rosé wines can be complex, right? And can be among some of the best wines that you can actually drink and enjoy. The Vivino app rates this rosé that we're drinking today among the top 4% of all wines in the world. And will you believe that this comes at an average price of around $23 a bottle?
Wow.
So, you're going to have a really great quality wine at a very affordable price. And that just is a great combination.
I mean, this really is a wine style that I think there's something for everyone in this category. And so if any of the descriptions that we had today sound interesting to you and you haven't given rosé a fair shot, I would really encourage it because I am just so impressed by the breadth of this category. And this is yet again another elegant, affordable, delicious wine for an upcoming summer pool party season. I mean, your guests are at the very least going to love you for serving a bottle like this. So my favorite part is always to ask about pairings. So what do you think our listeners should think about when pairing this wine with food?
Well, this rosé selection is very versatile when it comes to pairing. The winemaker themselves refer to this wine in their notes as a modern and gastronomic rosé. Wow, right? So they intended it to go with food from the outset. So for a party platter, I suggest a take on some bruschetta, right?
Yeah.
I think in addition to some nice tomatoes and olive oil, you could add some bits of shrimp and lobster, and after all, these vineyards are near the Mediterranean Sea, so that seafood pairing will be right at home there, right? I like to keep this Spanish wine in country when pairing it with cheese. So therefore, go for a Spanish manchego. And I have some nice manchego on some crackers there for you. Mm-hmm. So give this a taste and sip some of the wine.
Okay, yeah, don't mind if I do. I'll grab a cracker here and some cheese.
And I'm having the same thing. Mm-hmm. Even though I've set this up, I always enjoy joining you with our tastings.
Of course. We always talk about on the show how wine is an opportunity for community and storytelling, so naturally we have to share cheese.
Right.
I mean, and this cheese is so perfect to go with this wine. There's some awesome acidity in the wine, and it's cutting straight through the fatty, creamy texture of the manchego, but both are still nice and mild and just complement each other so nicely.
Right. I think the tartness quality of the wine also plays really nicely with the manchego. So, And you're not wrong when you say that Manchego has a fatty texture. It's made from rich sheep's milk, and it's nearly 60% fat,
Wow.
right? When you look at the nutrition label on some cheese like that. So you need a wine with some good acid to complement this cheese, and this one does so nicely. But sometimes it's not just the acid, it's also the flavor compounds, and this cheese is kind of buttery, and the Manchego flavors just work really nicely with this citrusy, tart wine.
And you were even mentioning too the herbal qualities of the wine, herbs and cheese, all of that just naturally, it just makes sense. So it's even pulling out some of the more savory elements of the wine, which is really interesting.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we're at that point. We're going to take a short break, and I am going to plan to pair some more of this wine and cheese. And Keith and I will be back in a minute just to wrap up our show with a segment that we like to call The Finish. Welcome back, everyone. You found us today for our second episode in the fourth season of what we're calling our Summer Fun Project. We're now in the portion of the show called The Finish.
Yes. As part of today's finish, I want to provide a little more background on today's winery, Casa Roja. But, audience, Charlotte and I really did eat some more of the Manchego cheese and drink some more of that wine during the break.
Yes, we did.
It is really good, I'm telling you.
I would never lie about eating cheese, okay? Let's be on the record there.
Right.
It's that tasty. So, yes. Well, and I, back on the winery, though I can talk about cheese for an entire episode, it's always really fun for me to learn more about the people who make the wine that we're drinking. It really provides some consumer ownership behind the label.
Well, perhaps it's because I've been married to my wife, Yvonne, for such a long time. We celebrated 37 years earlier this year.
Wow.
I'm drawn to these wineries that are owned by husband and wife teams. My wife and I never worked together, but we are a team, and I think that special bond of marriage really translates into a unique operating style when spouses own the winery together.
I think that's so special, too. James and I just marked our second year, so we still have some catching up to do to get to yours and Yvonne's sector. But I can get on board with this concept of teams and the power of a marriage behind wine. I think that's so special.
Well, we did say that we are an intergenerational cast for this podcast, right? We're taking a little piece out of the what is that show on Hulu, Only Murders in the Building,
yes,
right?
Yes.
They have Selena Gomez as the young actress, and then they have Martin Short and Steve Martin as representing the older part of the audience.
It
so
works.
That's a podcast show, and this is a podcast,
it's just working. And Selena Gomez and I share a birthday.
Oh,
Fun
wow,
fact.
that's right. Okay.
I appreciate the comparison.
Well, let's get back to talking about Casa Roja. It was founded in 2009 by the husband and wife team, Jose Luis Gomez and Laura Munoz. And the operation just seemed to click from the very beginning. Only 5 years after launching their winery, Wine and Spirits magazine named Casa Roja in 2014 as one of the 100 best wineries in the world.
Wow.
Now think about that for a moment. The couple built a winery from nothing to one of the world's best in 5 years.
I mean, that is such a remarkable achievement. I can't even wrap my head around it. And it seems that over the past decade that they've been able to keep it going at such a high level.
Yeah, a remarkably high level, really. I would agree that they're turning out better wines now than when they made that list 10 years ago.
That's crazy. I mean, do you have any insights then into their secret sauce?
Well, I certainly don't know them personally, and I'm not trying to imitate that I do, right? But I'm drawn to them from reading about their business philosophy. Here's what Jose says about his approach. Great wines take time and a lot of dedication. Constant improvement, continuous evolution, and the search for perfection in the vineyard and after in the winery is the only way. I believe that only when you're in love with your job, you can dedicate everything to it.
Wow.
That's really an impressive
powerful.
quote. You know, and Laura's perspective also helps explain their success. Here's what she says, quote, "We make wines that represent us, wines with which we feel identified," end quote.
Man. I mean, you can't get more personal than that when Laura is saying we make wines that represent us, and Jose is saying you have to make wines that you're in love with, right?
Right,
I mean,
right.
and so you can just feel the love for their craft and for, I guess, one another coming through this wine. It's really an extension of who they are.
Yeah, exactly. And I am so happy that they share their passion with us, right? This bottle of rosé makes me happy when I drink it.
Agreed.
And isn't that what a wine is supposed to do, right? It's supposed to make us happy. You know, I get that from other wines they make as well. And allow me to recommend one of their robust reds made from 100% Tinto Fino grapes. It's the opposite style of today's rosé. That red is deep ruby and aged 15 months in oak barrels, and it delivers all of those luscious black fruits, black currants, and blackberries, right? You know, so today we had the rosé, and I highly encourage our audience to go find the Haru, but don't sleep on their other wines as well.
Right. I mean, apparently we need to explore the entire catalog. I mean, I've definitely added that red to my list, so...
You know, there's a bottle of it right over there on my rack, right on my wall rack.
Of course there is.
Well, I do have a lot of wine here in the wine kitchen, you know, so you know I'm kind of obsessed with this stuff.
It's only fitting. And so, well, I guess it's time to finish with the finish and go ahead and bring today's episode to a close. Keith, what can you tell us about the wine we'll drink next week?
Well, I am very excited about next week's wine. Well, I'm excited about every week's wine that we show on the show, but
Could you
but
imagine
this one,
if you weren't?
right? But you know, next week we're going to be featuring a dry white varietal grown widely in Austria, Germany, and France's Alsace region. But the one we're drinking is one I fell in love with from California's Sonoma Valley.
You know, Keith, you're always excited about the wines we drink on this show, but that's what also makes it so fun. Every week is a new adventure. So until next week, everyone, we'll see you then.
Yes, thanks everyone. Cheers.